They call it Dega. Since 1969, the top drivers in all of NASCAR have come here looking to survive not just the big one, but survive the various strategies, the different blocks and moves you need to make in a circuit of an event, and as well, to have the amount of luck needed to take the checker flag in Lincoln, Alabama. Tonight, it's the question of who will get involved in trouble and who will get the most luck on the evening and the right balance of strategy and speed. We're about to find out here on the Global SimRacing Channel. We welcome you to the virtual Talladega Superspeedway for the third race of the 2020 Season 4 campaign for the Precision Racing League Cup Series. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside me is eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series competitor Christian Schauner. Behind the scenes, star director Sean Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. These drivers are getting ready for what's expected to be a challenging race tonight because you never know what's going to happen at Talladega, Christian. This is going to be an exciting one.
Yeah, Talladega is always a completely wild race. Obviously, we've seen, especially today in the real-life race, it was particularly wild today. And even throughout the week in the regular iRacing service races, it's been pretty wild. And that's really just because everybody has the opportunity to really make a pass and have a chance to actually win the race, which is a cool deal and a good opportunity for some of the drivers who might struggle on some of the more regular tracks. And I think tonight we're going to see a lot of three-wide racing, especially this week. It seems like you can make the third lane work to make a run towards the end of the race. But I prefer being in the middle here. I actually feel like that's the best place to be.
Yeah, the middle line was really moving on Tuesday. Also moved a lot in real life today once you got that line going as well. But before we describe a bit more on how things could go tonight, to talk about series title sponsors for the Precision Racing League Cup Series. First, WEBB Hearing Centers, a family-owned and operated business since 1972, provides top-quality hearing aids and service in Arizona. Visit them at webhearingcenters.com. Series is also sponsored by ButtKicker. ButtKicker products include incredible immersion and bring realism to every game. Feel every nuance and truly put yourself in the driver's seat. For more information to feel what you've been missing, go to thebuttkicker.com. As these drivers prepare for what's expected to be a wild race tonight, let's take a look at your point standings after 2 rounds. Keep in mind your current points leader, James O'Brien, mentioned earlier tonight he'll be taking a drop week this evening, so this will change this evening, and whoever finishes clean could be your points leader after 3 rounds without drops. Bradley Hawley is the next driver who could jump up 4 points back. He's one of the 2 winners so far this season, along with O'Brien. Keith Haney, Colton Lane, and Robert Bisson Jr. round out your top 5, separated by 11 total points after the first 2 races. For the various different teams, it's been a dominating performance for Athlete Booker Team Hype for the past couple seasons. They lead at the top of the standings in a tight battle so far this season, however, by just 2 points. 7 points back is Third Rock Racing with SGE eSports in third. Car Ramrock rounds out your top 5 through 35 points back, with 2 total top 10 finishes for their drivers and a top 5 in the first 2 races. Now, as talked about at the start of the season and during the last broadcast, PRL has a full playoff championship taking place for the whole 2020 calendar year in this final season of said calendar year for iRacing. At the moment, 4 drivers are locked into the next round of the playoffs, the round of 12, when we go to tracks like the Roval, Kansas, and Texas. Among the drivers who will move on to that said round are James O'Brien, Bradley Hawley, Joshua Daniels, and Richard Regan Jr. Keep in mind the drivers outside the bubble, as you see in red, are Wilson Jr., along with Durbin, Chad Brown, along with the 76 of James Duke. Among the drivers on the cutoff, Scotty Johnson and Danny Cervantes. Again, a win locks you into the next round for the 2020 Playoff Championship. Now, as we get ready to go racing, time could be a major factor tonight, Christian.
Yeah, definitely. With it being round 3 of 10, we're going to be doing 55 laps here at Talladega. Now, if we start to get yellows, obviously the laps tend to go out to being over 2 minutes, so with it only being a 1 hour time limit, we could come up against that. I hope that we don't, because I always like to see a good finish here. And with it being 55 laps, we'll definitely see 1 pit stop. There won't be a real pressure in terms of fuel sense. Should be able to get out to about 33 to 35 laps on fuel. So we won't be seeing drivers run into issues with fuel management, and I don't think we'll see them running into issues with tire management either, with 4 sets in total.
Yeah, lots and lots of sets available for tonight, to say the very least. Also, have seen drivers go as long as 38 laps on some of the mileages. Now, these drivers have about 3 minutes before we start off qualifying. They've been practicing in packs for more than 2 hours. It's a very hot track, however. Many of the tracks across the official races this week have been on cooler tracks or very windy tracks. Tonight, it's 120 degrees, the track temp, 79 degrees, the air temp, Fahrenheit. 59.3% humidity, very little wind as per usual in this series with partly cloudy skies on iRacing Day, May 15th, 2020. In other words, it's going to be much more hotter than some drivers may expect compared to official racing this week.
Yeah, and I think that will have a bit of an impact because what we've generally seen for Talladega is that handling doesn't really matter so much like it would at Daytona, just because the corner radius is quite a bit bigger, so you're actually not kind of struggling as much to cut the car down and whatnot. But there is still a couple of areas around the track which are particularly difficult. Being on the bottom through the tri-oval, it doesn't look hard at all, but in-car it is actually really quite difficult. It's pretty flat down there. You're obviously going very, very quickly, and it's really, really rough. So with the higher temperatures, I think we could see some drivers struggling as they get towards the end of the run. I know, on Tuesday night, it wasn't particularly easy to hold on to the car when you were getting towards the end of the fuel run.
Yeah, it looked like a lot of the cars were fairly stable for the most part. In fact, again, going green just about the entire way, all the way until just one caution flag happened in that respective race. Let's talk about some of the storylines for tonight. First, as mentioned, no James O'Brien tonight. He'll be taking a drop week as he is going to the Savage Garage Rally for 2020. For those who do not know, that is a YouTuber known for having that NASCAR street legal truck and owns his own racetrack in the state of Florida. So James O'Brien taking his one drop week for the championship. As well, though, the bigger news, he has a new teammate as well. Joshua Daniels was released effective immediately during the week from Athlete Booker Team Hype and replaced by the driver of the number 55 Ford Mustang. James Dewar will be replacing him for the rest of the season.
An interesting decision there, because obviously James Dewar has had some good runs, but to kind of leave out Joshua Daniels when he's had some really, really strong performances is an interesting move. We'll have to see how that plays out for him.
Now still, these cars are continuing to try different practice lines, etc. The race pace on average so far has seen 47 4s as the quickest times on the board to 48 3s. For this type of a race, how would you try to plan this about? Because, again, in a series like this, the maximum amount of teammates you can have is 3. There's technically corporate teammates here and there, but it's not per se as simple as, oh, hey, I've got 10 race car teammates in the same lobby as me, like an official race.
Well, I think actually what we're seeing right now is a really good example of what's going to be important tonight, and it's going to be that green flag pit stop if we do have one, because that's really going to determine how and where you come out in that pack after that pit stop. And what we've seen is that it's really quite difficult for drivers to get their way through the pack, especially when it forms up to 2 and 3 wide, because you can't really go anywhere, so to speak. If you're not at the head of the line, it's really, really difficult to be able to move into a different line because everybody's just packed so tightly. So really making sure you come out really in the top 5 to at the most the top 10 after that pit stop is going to be really huge, especially if the race goes green.
Qualifying is underway, by the way. 5 minutes, 2 solo qualifying laps, and you just so happened to start on the pole this past Tuesday for the NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, despite dealing with wind the entire qualifying session. What does it take to get on the pole with this type of car?
Well, yeah, the whole wind issue and dynamic weather is a little bit tricky to deal with, and there is a little element of luck in that. Well, there's if you talk to some people, there's a lot of element of luck in that, but it does come down to actually running a really consistent line around the track, because you can make mistakes. You obviously want to be as close to the bottom as possible and as close to that yellow line as possible, but you don't want to touch it. You do lose a lot of time doing that. So my preference is to kind of run one lane up coming to the start of the lap. And then from that point onwards, never really leave the bottom lane and just sort of drift up to put the right sides on the first set of dashed lines. There is a little bit of playing around that can happen in terms of how you choose to use your warm-up lap, I know that a couple of drivers were finding that actually you didn't really want to go full speed on the initial out lap. You could wait a little bit. You could kind of roll down the backstretch a little bit slow and then go later, and they were finding that gave them a little bit of a tire benefit. So there's a little bit of variance in that sense, but I think it does come down to what each individual thinks is the best approach for them.
Which approach ends up being the best one tonight as we take a look at Brandon Adams from Adams Family Racing. To remind you that we have live timing and scoring available for tonight's event at GSRC.tv to follow with your favorite teams and drivers in this race tonight. Once again, that's GSRC.tv. As Adams among the first drivers to cross the stripe, Robert Corson bumps him with a 51 flat on the first lap. Of course, for those who do not know, with qualifying in iRacing, with the fixed setup, the fastest times are usually around the 50.3s to 5s with the lower tape level.
Yeah, so what we're seeing here at the moment is we're seeing some drivers who are going out and trying to set a lap right off the bat. So drivers like Robert Corson have obviously gone out and used that first lap running around the bottom of the racetrack, whereas other drivers like James Durr haven't. They've obviously ran around the top of the track and trying to wind up for that second lap, and that's the one that they're going to kind of go for as their primary lap, so to speak.
Well, you caught it there. Robert Corson happy with his first lap. In fact, he's already pulling off. You've seen what we see one driver back in the field tonight. We haven't seen Jose Medina in the past little bit, or at least in a Toyota in the most recent bit in the 24. As Greg Corson also crossed the stripe with a 51.1.
We're going to have to wait to see. Some drivers don't look like they're actually going to set a lap at all, which is a bit of an interesting strategy. And I can understand that attitude. I know some drivers really don't like to set times at plate tracks. They like to run at the back of the pack for a long period of time. But there is an element to why you wouldn't want to do that, and that's pit stall selection. So it looks like it's kind of trivial coming down the pit road, but it really isn't. And especially if you've got one of those stalls that's right near the pit entry, that is quite a disadvantage actually in a race situation, because if you're on the outside and you've got cars underneath you who are further down the lane, it's really, really difficult for you to get into your pit box. So I can't say I agree with the idea of not qualifying at a track such as Talladega or Daytona.
I was going to ask about that because I'm almost in that preference of I want to be in the front as a driver, because I want to be in front of the potential trouble, if you get what I mean. We'll see how things continue to shake out as Regan Jr. is your current pole sitter. Daniel Sumner Corson, your top 4, with Cal Gill rounding out the top 5. Mike Knight putting up a 51.1, gets himself up to 11th. Some blistering quick times at the top of the board, only 51 flats ending up being her quickest times, but still, the top 10 separated by less than a tenth of a second. In fact, all the way back to about 14th and 15th.
Yeah, look like everybody's kind of got the line down pretty solidly. Haven't seen many drivers actually cutting under the yellow line coming to the flag stand, which is a little bit interesting. Normally you tend to see that in official racing.
Yeah, technically, yeah. Because there is that chance to save the time, but as well, there's also, if you don't have comfortability with that, you can scrub speed.
Yeah, absolutely, and that comes down to a little bit what I was talking about being on the bottom lane through the tri-oval. It's very, very bumpy on the regular bottom lane. It's even more bumpy if you're actually down on the apron. So
yeah,
it's worth a couple of hundredths, but I can understand why drivers might be a little bit uncomfortable trying to take that line.
See which drivers are comfortable with track position tonight as we get ready to look at your starting grid for Race 3 of the PRL Cup Series season. It's Richard Regan Jr. on the pole tonight. He'll be looking to try and rebound after a very rough first race of the season in a suspension for the second race of the year. He'll start alongside his former teammate Joshua Daniels. Stephen Durbin and Charles Sumner start in row 2 with Robert Corson and the 88 machine starting in 5th. Lane Adams with one of his best starts of the season in 6th, with Brett Adams in 7th. Patrick Calgill qualifies in 8th. Brandon Adams and David Wilson Jr. round out your top 10, Christian.
Just missing out on the top 10, we got James Durr and Jose Medina in 11th and 12th. Then Adam Zemke and Doyle Lawrence in 13th and 14th. Mike Knight with Christopher Williams alongside him in 15th and 16th. Greg Corson and Baron Hilton back in 17th and 18th, with Ronald Overbay and Scotty Johnson, a driver who is in contention for that playoff championship. He's starting back in 20th.
Very deep in the field indeed, right in front of Paul Johnson and Robert Bisson Jr., rounding out your top competitors in the top 22. One air car did qualify on time tonight. That was James Duke. The rest of the drivers set via provisional: Bradley Hawley, Colton Lane, Danny Cervantes, Pat Harvey, Mark Kalin, Chad Brown, Nicholas Schwartz, your top 30. The rest of the field: Keith Haney, Brendan Chatley, Brian Abbott, James Haney, elect me to start at the back of the field for this evening's race. Now, Christian, as these cars get ready for tonight's action, what are the keys to victory in your opinion for this one?
Well, if it goes green, it's definitely going to come down to that green flag pit stop and making sure that you've got a group of guys to come down with who are all coordinated and are all ready to form up as soon as you get to that pit exit cone, because that's such a huge deal, is getting back up to speed, not losing out to the pack if it's still out there, or if other drivers have managed to form up faster than you have. And that's really, really key if we see a green flag pit stop. If we don't, then it's just going to come down to trying to maintain as much track position as possible for the entire night, trying to stay at the front. There is going to be opportunities to move your way forwards, though, so drivers who are starting at the back, drivers like Keith Haney, he's third in points right now, so he's going to be one to watch. He's starting at the back. And it's going to be possible to move through, but it's going to take some risky moves. It's going to take some help, especially if drivers want to make that third lane work.
Curious how this all plays out as one driver you see there having to get their engine started up. Who else are you keeping an eye on for this type of a race tonight, especially with it being 55 long laps, at least 50 seconds per lap?
Well, I think this has got to be an opportunity for some of those drivers who might not normally feature at the front of, say, a mile-and-a-half race. And we've got a couple of drivers starting at the front who might be ones to watch out for. Drivers such as Charles Sumner, he's a regular top 10 contender, but he's always a little bit short to win the race, and this might be an opportunity to turn that around.
Keep an eye on him, absolutely indeed, as well. I think I'm keeping an eye on drivers like Reagan Jr., who's been doing well on the super speedways. Just needs some luck now. But as well, this could be a statement race for James Dewar, because in that 55, he had a decent run in the last race and showed some speed at Bristol. He performs well tonight, or even finds a way to stay in the top 5. That's going to be huge for him in the points, since he's in the middle of the pack in terms of standings entering tonight in the 55.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of drivers will be looking at this as being their drop week, but if you can get out of Talladega without having to use it as your drop week, then that's a huge advantage for the latter part of the season.
Exactly. See which drivers can capitalize on this tonight. And it's Regan Jr., Daniels, Durbin Sumner, Robert Corzin, Lane Brett Adams, 6 and 7, Cal Gill, Brandon Adams, Wilson Jr., your top 10. 2.66 miles is Talladega Super Speedway, open since 1969. Many of the greatest finishes in all of stock car racing have taken place here in Talladega, Alabama. Who will conquer these 33 degrees of banking corners today? We're about to find out. Green flags out. We're underway from Talladega.
The pack is a little bit slow getting away, and it looks like Durbin's having a little bit of connection issues for me. That might make a couple of drivers wary of being around him when it comes to pushing him.
Outside of that, a good start for the whole bottom line here at Talladega. Most of it forming up, but already a big gap, as you mentioned, that mid-pack by a few car lengths. Take a look.
Yeah, a lot of drivers in that bottom lane, and the top lane's already kind of dying out. There's only 3 cars at the front of the field in the top lane. That's going to make it really, really difficult for those drivers to kind of keep the momentum going up there, and unless they can form up and get a couple more drivers in that line, that's going to fall back really, really quickly.
Daniels up in the lead now with all of this, as Sumner still hasn't ducked down. Still working with Lenny Adams' cars as Regan Jr. dropping to the back.
An interesting strategy this, and obviously he might be trying to play out, get a little bit of fuel mileage, or he might just be dropping back there to kind of get a little bit more experience in terms of passing cars, seeing how easy it is to execute passes, just in case he has to come from the back late on in the race. But dropping yourself back, that's a dangerous move.
And they have given a warning to Stephen Durbin on that technical issue. Have told him to stay at the bottom of the racetrack and drop to the rear end of the field with that issue. So Durbin will have to sacrifice a top 3 position for the safety of the field. Now in the lead, though, it's Charles Sumner up at the point in front of Joshua Daniels, Blaine Adams, Robert Corzin among your top 4.
Everybody kind of still strung out just a little bit. Nobody really pushing hard this early on, and really that makes sense. Obviously, only 2 laps into a 55-lap race, there's no need to really be making some aggressive moves at this point.
Yeah, it's not as simple as a sprint where everyone can start in front. It's almost like an endurance race, so to speak, where you want to plot things out. Some drivers, as talked about, like to be up at the front. Some like to be at the back. Regan Jr., as you can see, really wants to be at the back of the field.
Yeah, he's got to be careful going that far back, though, because the pack does have the potential to split up, especially if you start falling into the group of drivers who really want to be very, very at the backs, so not even really in the lead pack at all. And that's going to make it really difficult for him to move forwards if he wants to towards the end of the fuel run.
Speaking of the fuel runs, of course, one of the main things to expect is a lot of switching for the race lead, because as the leader, you burn more fuel in theory, Christian. Some drivers have burned up to 2-3 laps extra fuel by being the lead car this week at Talladega.
Yeah, you absolutely do, and that's got to be a consideration for your other team members that are working with you in terms of how much do you as a group want to be in the lead, because it is a significant disadvantage having to pit early, because you're the first group of cars off and out of the lead pack, so the lead pack's still running at full speed, whilst you guys are trying to get up to speed, and you will lose time if you have to pit early.
One driver may lose the draft. You may have noticed Adam Zemke pull off the racetrack down the backstretch. He slowed down so much, he's checked Danny Cervantes up in 33rd and 34th position. They've lost the draft from the main pack already as a result. The lead pack now features about 32 cars after that major check. Among your biggest movers early on, +7 for Christopher Williams, +11 for Chad Brown, +10 for Brian Abbott.
Big difference in ethos for certain drivers in the field. Obviously, some of them want to get to the front as soon as they can, as we see a run from the top line here.
And those are the Adams family racing machines. They all qualified in the top 10. Their best qualifying performance as a group, Christian, this season. And you mentioned the chance for some underdogs to pop up, or some drivers you don't expect to see up at the front. Why not have a group of brothers work together and be in sync?
Yeah, and this is definitely a great opportunity for them. Obviously, they will burn a little bit more fuel if they do want to lead this line like that, but they have a pretty significant advantage as a team here, being able to group up with 3 people that you can absolutely trust that will go with you if you ask them to make a move. Yep. So that's going to help them out a lot, I think, towards the end of the race.
And an audio issue reported now for Charles Sumner. He's forced to pull off to the side of the racetrack. Everybody's having problems early on, it seems. That's the 3rd or 4th different driver trying to pull to the back in this first 6 laps alone. As now with the lead, it's Blaine Adams.
Yeah, and Sumner's going to really struggle here to maintain the draft. He's had to drive on the apron through 3 and 4. That'll be a big loss of speed for him.
And he's still trying to find a hole as well, but the Adams family racing machine is looking to control the bubble, and that's one of the main important parts when it comes to super speedway racing too, Christian, is you need to be able to control the front if you want to get a race win. I've seen drivers in various different races in series do this throughout the week.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds a little bit strange to say this, but you can sort of kill the race if you've got a couple of people on the same team at the front, because you can control who's getting the push to the lead and who is effectively being forced to drop back. And that's even more the case if you've got a car on the inside lane, because right here, what could happen? Joshua Daniels has got this big run on the top potentially from the other 2 Adams cars. If he gets to the lead, it's possible for Blaine Adams to just actually roll out of the gas, force that bottom lane to slow down, and then jump himself back to the lead with the help of his other brothers.
There's Daniels with a lead lap, and by the way, the track has dropped a lot in temperature. You may have noticed, -6 from instead of practice to qualifying. In some time is about 3:15, so as the day gets later, that is sometimes something to be expected, is it can cool down, as he didn't jump up the 33. In fact, it's Brett Adams now with a chance to take the lead.
Yeah, and this is kind of exactly what I was meaning right here. Blaine didn't really get on the bumper of Joshua Daniels. He has them now, but initially he didn't. And if he'd have chosen to stay off him, he'd have had a pretty clear opportunity to let one of his brothers back down into the bottom lane to take the lead.
fact, there's a bit of the checkup right now. We'll see if lane comes back up. No, not clear quite yet. Maybe down the back straightaway. And this is important, too, to make sure you line up the timing of a push as well, because it's not just about the temps, but where do you carry the momentum and the energy?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that everybody always sees is they always see in the corner, if you're not pushing, the line you're in kind of drops back. But interestingly, we've seen there's times where that doesn't matter so much, and you can actually use the corner to kind of lay off the car ahead of you, let everybody breathe, and then just push very, very aggressively down the straightaway. And sometimes it can actually be enough to be a net gain. So that's something that drivers hopefully have practiced a little bit, because it should give us a little bit of variance in terms of what drivers are trying as line strategy late on in the race, and that'd kind of be cool to see.
Van Adams back now to the race lead and not electing to drop down there. I'm curious how this all factors in, of course, as well, with how these drivers play out. As you can see, too wide much the pack. Majority of the drivers staying in either the top line in the preference or the bottom line for most of the field, or in the case of Reed Jr. letting everybody in the friends go, as there's the Adams machines to the bottom. That's Brett and Brandon Adams to the bottom.
Yeah, an interesting decision to bring both pairs, well, the pair of cars down, because now they don't have control of that top line anymore.
Yeah, it's now James Dewar with the chance to try and get the push. They don't have as big of numbers, though, compared to even a couple laps ago. However, that 09 machine has been very committed to finding a way up to the front. Huge push up the track. One of the Adams cars nearly snaps on the bottom of the track.
The 09 machine is really, really moving at this point. Up from 16th into 4th right now. Potentially 2nd if he can push the other car to the lead here.
And they are clear. Does James elect to take it or stay with Williams? He doesn't elect to drop down. Wants to maybe take the 09 with them. And now that top line's formed up a little bit. Brian Abbott's jumped onto the choo-choo train as well up top.
Yeah, the problem with this, though, is he really, well, Christopher Williams, that is, really needs to push James to the lead soon, because the longer he sits behind him, pushing him this aggressively, he's going to get hot. There's complete inevitability about that. And so James, the next time he's clear, probably really has to make the move down to the bottom. Otherwise, Christopher's going to have to get well off him to cool that car down.
Or at the very least, back up enough to where the next time he pushes, like right here, it might not get them fully clear. Huge push as to be expected. Can he get clear? Just about did, but again doesn't take it, and now Williams forced to cool it down.
And that's the difficulty right there. You see that killed the run on the top line completely. It's going to take them probably maybe 2, even 3 laps for Williams to cool off and get back into the position he was in before, where you can really push on James's bumper.
May have noticed as well, some of the teammates are starting to work up on this top line as well. We mentioned Brian Abbott. All the Third Rock Racing machines are up on the top now as well in this line. While the Adams family racing machines are elected to go to the bottom side, the majority of their teammates are just scattered about in the field, it seems.
Yeah, see, this is a chance actually for Joshua Daniels to, if I was him, I'd be really trying to tap into the comms of the Adams family guys, try and get them to pit with me, or me pit with them, because he's got a good opportunity here to pit with 3 other cars, and if you can come out as a group of 4 already packed up, that's gonna get you up to speed pretty fast, and obviously being that lead line as well, you're gonna lose out less if you're the first guys to come down. You can really organize your pit entry.
Should note that the tires are starting to cause a little bit of looseness. We talked about the apron, specifically the bumps rather in the tri-oval in the bottom line. Greg Corson, I should rather say, nearly spun the car in the middle of the tri-oval last time by. So that's starting to come into play for some of these cars a bit earlier than most people expect here.
Yeah, and that I think is going to come down to the pretty hot track temperature that we've got. And I think that's only going to get worse the longer into the run we get and the more aggressive everybody gets. There's going to be a third line form at some point. It just has to happen, because drivers in the back of the pack are going to reach a point of frustration being in either the bottom or the middle that they can't go forwards. So we will see a run on that third line.
41 laps to go this time by. Still, the top line is now dissipating a bit. The third block racing cars who carried a lot of that energy at the back of the line have now moved off said line. So there's not as many cars stacked up on that groove. As well, here's the thing. Some drivers like to side draft a lot or squeeze a little bit in the corners. Others like to give a ton of space. In your opinion, is there a preference or difference, say, to being tight to somebody who's on your bottom compared to leaving this car length of space in the corner?
It really depends on how much you trust the driver say if you're in the middle lane, it depends on how much you trust the driver who's directly underneath you. And that situation only becomes more important when you get into a 3-wide situation, especially when we're getting through the tri-oval. Obviously, those drivers on the bottom lane, we're seeing them start to move around a little bit more, and you have to be cognizant of that if you're in the middle lane, because you can't pinch them as much through that area of the track. And I think it's important for all the drivers to understand that is an issue, and I'm sure they all do. But that's an area where you really can't pinch somebody down unless it's the very last lap, where honestly the risk is worth it.
Or at least you have the comfortability of the drivers around you, absolutely. As Williams, another big push. Looking on board again, though, Dewar just doesn't want to go to the bottom, it seems. He likes being up top.
Yeah, and I'm honestly impressed that Williams can push as aggressively as he is without risking blowing his car up, because this is, I mean, he's tied to his bumper a vast majority of the time. You do see him peeking out a little bit there to get some air, but he's being very aggressive with the pushing, and it's working to an extent. He's getting James to the point where he's just about clear and could sweep down if he wanted to. But how it's not pushing Williams to the point where he's having to jump miles out of the line to cool down, and actually right now he does. He's doing a great job of cooling that car off.
25% is the tape number on the fixed setup here for this week at Talladega, as one driver also shuffling back in Baron Hilton and all this to cool off himself. That, however, again, just dissipated all that energy up on the top line and may open the door, yes, for Joshua Daniels to weeble wobble up to the middle.
And Daniels has spotted the opportunity here, and now this is where he can get pushed to the lead, because James's engine is completely cool. He can really push on Josh and just push him straight out to the lead.
He's actually backing it up a little bit here, maybe trying to time up the run for the corner exit. All the Adams family racing cars lined up astern on the bottom side. There's Zalk, Robert Corson in fourth. A couple of the other drivers that are sneaking up here. Doyle Lawrence along with Chad Brown, Wilson Jr. among those separate competitors. Just not a big push yet on the top.
Yeah, that looked like they were a little bit misaligned right there, and they're still misaligned somewhat coming through 3 and 4. Just means that Josh isn't getting the push he needs to get him out to the lead.
Take a look on board. There's the shove, and Daniels nearly snapped it towards the left with that big bump.
So this is a good opportunity actually for these guys to try and learn to work with each other at this point. Obviously only on lap 19, still a long way to go. So this is where you want to be finding out what you can and can't do. So it's not a huge deal really that James isn't able to push Josh out to the lead. But hopefully by the time they get to say lap 50, lap 52, they'll kind of got it figured out and how to work that top line.
Absolutely. Green flag so far is stretched to now 19 laps this time by as the top line dissipates. Now the question mark starts to enter of when do you pit as a driver, because the green light on fuel this week has been in official racing about 36 to 37 laps to go. This is around that mark of that race right now. So when do you decide as a driver to come on in? Because the key thing is you need to have friends to come in with you, otherwise you're losing 3 seconds a lap.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And I think in this situation, the call is to probably push the fuel mileage as long as possible, then to come down and take 2 tires only and as minimal amount of fuel as possible. Maybe just keep yourself enough to do 1 green white checker just to see. But I think realistically you got to try and cut it close, because there is a longer pit stop time in terms of if you take a full tank of fuel.
Indeed, and you see though, Daniels shuffled out. Dewar and Williams, though, don't have any helpers willing to take out them to the third line. And now they're getting freight train. Looked like they wanted to leave Daniels out to dry. No one else wanted to go with them.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too early for those guys to be trying to make that third lane work. And with 2 cars, I've seen it be possible to maintain with just 2 cars, but you definitely can't work your way forwards unless you've really got 3 or more.
It's still a good amount of speed you can pick up on the back straightaway, especially in that top line, yes. But again, it's just in the middle of the corners where it's the longest distance around that I think, again, hurts them where they can't do that as well. They are doing a very good job, though, on this top line so far.
Yeah, they're definitely making it work just to the point of maintaining. The issue is going to be, though, is that Williams is going to get hot. And as soon as he gets hot and has to lift off the back of James, they're both going to be going backwards unless they can pull someone with them. He's actually maybe got both of them clear to the front of the lead right here.
He does! He does! James Dewar to the race lead. Williams up to second, but not completely clear of Daniels. Daniels had just cleared by the Adams cars, and now 3 wide down the backstretch. Dewar squeezed tight up the middle of the line, moved Daniels back up to the race lead as now Williams gets squeezed out.
And that's an area, well, a time where being loyal to the people who've pushed you is actually not very helpful to you, because right there what happened was Dewar, he tried to keep the opening open for Williams to come down with him, and it was just too long, and Williams didn't have the space to pull in front of Daniels, and Daniels wasn't for letting him in at all, so that's why they both kind of got shuffled and now have gone back to leading that second line.
And now that top line has to regroup. That was their best move quite yet. You mentioned you can get it done with 2 cars if you do it right, and that was when it was done right up there, and now as a result, you have the Adams cars now being the pushing rods now for the 77. You see how close they are to the nose.
Yeah, I think that move there is probably only going to work that one time, because now I think that now the Adams guys have seen that move be done to them. They're going to be wise to what's happening, and they're not going to allow that to happen a second time.
Big run, though, for them once again, and you can tell that Williams and Dewar seem to really want to work together tonight, as all the Adams cars on the bottom have been starting to get a little bit loose. You've seen the cars bottoming out of touch. Can one of them get clear on the top line, though? Dewar is clear again. Williams, though, is not, and once again, Dewar just does not take it, continues to stay committed.
Yeah, and this is where I think that it would make a lot of sense for Dewar to move down, take it, and then Williams can get pushed by. He's got Jose Medina right behind him, ready to push him. And I think they could cycle both of them up to the lead on that bottom lane, but it relies on Dewar actually taking the position, something he seems very reluctant to do.
Surprised how committed he has been on the top. Normally, even as if you're saying the same comms window, you'll have drivers say, take it, take it, take it. I don't know if they've said to take it yet. Brett Adams has indicated on the radio he's coming in. So are the rest of the Adams family cars. So pit stops coming up this time by.
And that was actually a great opportunity there for Dewar and Williams to finally get down, take command of that bottom lane.
Yeah, they are trying to slow it on down to get back single file here now with Dewar in the race lead. This could break up the pack a touch. They'll have some friends with them. Doyle Rance also coming with them, etc.
And I think this is where we're going to see a big split in strategy. Obviously, this isn't near the end of the fuel tank, so there we go. You see all the Adams family cars coming down.
And I believe Brandon Adams close, just about avoided speeding. Bradley Hawley slides into the grass, and that's a decent chunk of cars. In fact, that's about 12 in total who pit on the first cycle.
And this is a really good pack to come down at this time. And now they're going to be able to form up. And they really shouldn't lose any time to the main pack, providing they stay formed up at this point.
See one driver missed their pit stall, though. Mark Kalen did not stop. That's going to be disastrous for the 62. Reagan Jr. coming in this time by, as well as several others in the main pack. Charles Sumner, Baron Hilton will come out as these cars move off the pit lane. Into the pit lane go the race leaders.
You see Williams, Joshua Daniels coming down, but a smaller group this time.
Oh, and Sumner just about ran into the back end of Regan Jr. All the Athlete Booker cars will be driving with some form of pink on their machines for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and nearly that pink and white and blue car got about crushed. As a result, it's James Duke in the race lead, Chad Brown, Wilson Jr., Keith Haney, Scotty Johnson not yet to pit as they dodge some of the cars out of the pit lane.
Yeah, this is where it's going to get really, really difficult for the drivers coming out of pit lane and the drivers still out on the racetrack. Those out on the racetrack need to stay formed up. They need to not lose momentum trying to pass around these cars that have just come out. At the same time, the guys who've just come out of the pit lane, they're fighting to get themselves all aligned so that they don't lose more time than is necessary to those drivers who are still staying out.
James Duke, Wilson, Scotty Johnson among the drivers who stay out this time. Third Rock cars along with Overbay, Durbin, along with Mike Knight also came in this previous time by on the stripe. Brendan Chatley also now out of the race. We also had Abbott run over his pit box. He'll lose some time as a result of the cycle.
Yeah, that's a huge mistake to make at a track such as Talladega, because you will never get that back in normal running, and as soon as you lose the pack, you're going another lap down very, very quickly shortly afterwards.
Still looking at these cars, not yet heading. Are these drivers you see on screen? 6 drivers in the lead pack. They also have a couple of the drivers who have pit, however, with them. Putting drivers like the 60 of Colton Lane and several others who lost time in the sequence here. And they can still push it for another good 6-7 laps.
I think this is actually maybe advantage to the drivers who are staying out at this point, because a lot of those cars that did come down have not managed to get formed up into a pack, as we're seeing a lot of cars being, well, a lot of single cars being passed by the lead pack at this point.
Here's the thing though, the paces are different. 49 ones for this group, 48 fives for the drivers who've already pit.
Yeah, and that's the disadvantage of having to form up again at pit exit, because it takes you a while to get organized, and all that time that you're doing that, the drivers who stayed out, they're still running at full speed, and obviously when they pit, they'll have to do the same thing, but by that time they'll have that time advantage that they built over you, and they'll have more time to get organized, and actually even if you do catch them, you're more likely to just pull those drivers up to speed, and that's obviously a pretty big advantage to being one of the last drivers to pit, providing that you're still in a good size group of cars when you do so.
As you've seen, there were more cars who pit the last time by. The drivers who have not pit yet are the SGE eSports machines. These cars were actually quicker. The problem is they've lost Pat Harvey in all of this grouping with the drivers who pit. It's just Johnson and Bisson Jr. bumped drafting together right behind a couple others who's lost time in the pit stop sequence. That's Daniels among the drivers up the road and working with Charles Sumner, I believe that is. No, that is Overbay with Sumner.
Just looking at the lap times right there, Johnson and Bisson around 47.80s, and the rest of the pack is actually still in the 48, so they are still gaining time, but I'm seeing a couple of drivers, such as Baron Hilton, now dipping down into the 47s, so I think that they're going to be in trouble if they stay out for much longer.
Oh, and those are the cars who just came out of the pit lane from the last sequence. They nearly ran over Chad Brown and company. But the good news is, Pat Harvey's back. The bad news is they nearly crashed, and they're saying, you know what, let's pit.
That's a very late decision to pit, though, for the 07. He's going to struggle to get that down.
Going to be very close, as those are the last cars who had to pit on the racetrack. Everybody has now completed their service. The net race leader is Regan Jr. with Paul Johnson, Williams, and Brandon Adams, the top 4.
Somehow I am not surprised that that's how that worked out, with Richard Regan Jr. at the front of the line.
You want to hear the crazy thing? With the timing of the pit stops, you could short fuel it. A couple drivers took 2 to save time. Paul Johnson, who's now been shuffled to the top line, Adam Zemke, Danny Cervantes, Wilson Jr. among those drivers who took 2 and saved about 5 seconds on the pit stops. Here are the SGE eSports machines with Scotty Johnson a good 2 seconds quicker than his own teammates out of the pit boxes.
And that's a problem for him, because he's completely on his own here. And with these drivers not being formed up, the entire pack is going to clear them here on the backstretch.
There goes Harvey and Bisson Jr. And Johnson pulled out in front of all these cars, but they've already caught up to him. Here he comes on the bottom side. Here come your race leaders as they move up.
On the plus side for him, he's forcing them to go around him, and it's going to pull him up to speed. He's not going to lose out as much as he might have done.
His teammates, however, may just about lose the draft. They're at the very tail end of it. And now it gets interesting. 23 laps to go. This is usually where the intensity level starts picking up. In fact, there's that intensity with Keith Haney and Paul Johnson up to the top.
We haven't seen a true second line form at the front of the pack yet, but it's definitely the time to build that line and start trying to make moves.
Among the drivers who were penalized for their pit stop services for either speeding or had some issues in the stops, James Duke, 1 minute and 25 seconds in the pits. Jose Medina spent 55.7 seconds in the box. They've both lost the lap. 31 cars in the lead lap. Robert Corzin, Mark Kalin have lost the draft, as well as James Haney and Brian Abbott. There's also a second pack about 4 seconds back with Sumner, Lane, Greg Corzin, Chad Brown, Ronald Overbay. The rest of the field, 22 cars, are within range of this group with 22 to go.
And there we see Williams trying to get himself out to the lead ahead of Regan Jr., not able to clear that bottom line.
Williams has been working with drivers all day, and now they'll have to work on traffic. That's Kalin up the road. Will he go top or bottom is going to be the big question. Up to the top he goes to let these cars battle. Williams, though, not able to get clear as Keith Haney continues to work with them hard.
I think smart decision there by Kalin. It wasn't going to help him really to hold on the bottom, but it could have caused a wreck had he chosen to do so.
Kalin nearly tapped the wall, in fact, trying to stay up there. But now it's to where, at this point of the race, it's been green flag the entire time so far. What do you think is going to be the move that wins you a race like this with 21 to go? Anything can happen.
I think at this point you've got to be trying to work yourself into that top 5 just so that you're at least, at worst, the third car in line in either lane. Honestly, I wouldn't want to be in the bottom lane unless I was leading it, just because there's no options for you to go up. If we look all the way, it's just solid 2x2 at this point. The drivers in the middle lane, especially, say, drivers such as Keith Haney, they've got an opportunity to actually make a third line if it's necessary, though he has just pushed Christopher Williams to the lead.
New race leader indeed. It's Williams. Really slow drop down. Regan Jr. let on up. They're really loose, though, in the bottom of the racetrack. You still see there they are struggling with looseness and bottoming out. Regan Jr. says, I want to go top as a result.
And he's gone all the way to the third lane, actually electing to lose track position here. I think at this point of the race, that's not a great move. I don't know if he's going to actually be able to get back to the front doing this.
He did get a point for leading a lap, but still, there was the argument of wanting a clean car. Williams goes up to the top, meanwhile, at the front of the field, trying to control the bubble.
See, you've got Brandon Adams been disconnected from his brothers on the bottom line, but he is still the bottom line leader. He could still play a part in this race.
Keith Haney providing some really good shoves on that top line. And this was a line where it carries a lot of momentum on the straights. And here's the key thing. With the wind, there is a little tiny bit blowing behind them down the front stretch. Haney now hooked up with Williams on the bottom side to take control of the bottom.
And Haney made the decision to actually drop down to the bottom line with Williams there. Interesting decision. Didn't want to lead that top line at all. Was just about clear on the nose of Brandon Adams.
There was a bit of radio communication after that first initial move by Williams. I think Haney just wanted to go with him just about. But here's the thing. Paul Johnson, he's come close to some victories this season. This may be a shot for him to get a win here with 18 laps to go. He's working with Danny Cervantes, who's in a Ford tonight.
Yeah, this is definitely an opportunity for him, being the leader on that top lane as well. He's in a good position to make a run at it as we come down to the end of the race. All just comes down to whether he has the help he needs in that middle lane. And the other thing is, what happens if a third lane forms and the middle lane actually loses its help?
It'll be very crucial as Johnson, with some problems, calms on down as the 2 machine also joins them. Dewar, Daniels, Wilson Jr. among the other cars on the top, and Regan Jr.'s forcing a third line. He's shuffling out 2 of the Adams cars, the back of the pack, to make a third line work.
Very, very nearly ended in an incident right there, and the Adams drivers don't look like they're too happy about being forced out. It's actually broken up the back end of the pack here.
What a squeeze out there. That could have been disastrous. They were 4 wide coming off the corner with Regan Jr. right up against some of the quarter panels.
And it's completely checked up everybody from Regan Jr. on back. It's totally deformed the lines.
Starting to group back up a little bit on the top line. Dewar starting to drop back. Will Regan Jr. pick him up? Daniels trying to squeeze him on up a little bit to the top as Johnson tries to get the push on the middle line.
See, Regan Jr. is trying to move his way back forwards. Obviously, Dewar has been left out on that top line. He's going to be able to get in just ahead of the Adams family racing drivers.
16 laps to go this time. And now the Adams family racing cars are trying to get that third line to work at the very back of the pack. Well, they weren't happy about the squeeze out, but that's a long way for 2 of those cars to have to move up at the very top wall. No one else has jumped up with them yet.
Yeah, and that's the problem when you're that far back trying to make that third line go, because if you don't have the cars underneath you, you kind of don't get pulled along through the corner. And that's why their run pretty much stalled out as soon as it started right there.
Yes. Coming up to 15 laps to go. Been a very impressive race so far, and the lead pack, still at the 22 cars, goes from first with Christopher Williams all the way back to Nicholas Schwartz, who is only 1.6 seconds behind. That's how tight it is in this pack, as again the middle line starting to gain more cars.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody still has a chance here, and I think Brandon Adams is probably the driver who I'm keeping an eye on, and it's honestly not for a good reason. He's moving around a lot in the tri-oval, and I think that's going to be a factor as we come down to the end of this.
We've seen on some of the onboards, especially with that car bottoming out. Could be a tricky spot as again 2 of the Adams cars poke out of the back of the pack. The lead car still struggle to get the energy, and that's one of the main keys that was talked about in real world racing today, is the amount of cars, especially the cars at the back of the line, can provide a lot of energy for the rest of the line. When you have a big gap like James Dewar just built up, though, because a couple moved to the bottom, that top line's not going to have as many friends.
It isn't, but it's going to have some really fast drivers formed up on it in a second. You have Regan Jr. and Dewar all in a line with the 2 other Adams family drivers behind them. That's a solid group of 4 that we've seen be pretty fast all day. That if they choose to go to the third lane, I think they can make that work.
Richard Regan Jr. trying to make his own third line, nearly hooked Wilson Jr. Major checkup in the middle of the pack. The front car still trying to build back up. James Dewar's been shuffled out, as well as a couple other cars on the very top. You have to say that 46 really wants to go in between everybody with those gaps.
Yeah, he's seen an opportunity, and that opportunity is there where the bottom line and the current top line, which is really the middle, is leaving a really big gap between them. There is completely a car's width there, and he's trying to pull what I like to call the Tyler Hudson move, because he used to do this all the time, where he would trick the upper lane car to going slightly too high, and then sneak underneath them and force them out, and then he'd take that position for himself. And that really looks like what Regan Jr. and actually now Beasel Jr. is trying to do the same thing, but to Regan Jr., and it's actually going to work.
4 wide in the middle of the pack as the Adams family racing cars go up top. And Regan Jr. now is squeezed out to the very back of the field, back with Dewar and company. What a move, and Bisson Jr. is doing it again up the middle, just about back to the bottom.
I think Wilson Jr. is going to be really tired of this move at this point. He's had it happen around him, and he's been involved in it quite a few times now, and I don't think he's going to be keen to let anybody pull that one on him another time.
12 laps to go, and still Williams in control of the pack. Haney still in second, Brandon Adams in third, and now Regan Jr. wants to go. He's now up to the top trying to work with the Adams cars, may try and take James Dewar with them as the whole middle line has died out.
Yeah, this is the problem, that all that kind of infighting that we had in the middle line has dropped it really far back. And this is a huge disadvantage to that middle line now, because even if they do somehow get a really good run built up, it's going to come from so far back. It's going to be so obvious to the likes of Christopher Williams and Keith Haney at the front, and they're going to have so much time to block it off.
There's Bisot Jr. again, though, taking advantage of the gaps. And Regan Jr. falls right on through. 3 wide, middle of the pack, 11 laps to go. Just at the edge of the top 10 as Bisot Jr. now moves up. Plus 13 on the race.
And I can't believe that some of these drivers aren't actually covering this off. You can see it coming from a mile away. And again, Bisot Jr. is forcing his way in.
That time nearly hit the back end of the 2 machine now. All the way to the edge of the top 5 now as he gets squeezed. Backing off is Zemke. Regan Jr. forced to check. Right in between Cervantes and one of the Adams cars. Up the track goes the 2. Still 3 wide. All the way up to Paul Johnson now as Regan Jr. still shoves Bisot Jr. to the middle.
I can't believe that Paul Johnson didn't see that coming and cover that off. Those two have just driven through the entire pack. They're going to go all the way to the lead here.
Still 4 wide at the edge of the top 10. Now Bisot Jr. looking for the race lead. Regan Jr. though forced to check up. Here comes Durbin now, who had to check up at the early stages of this race due to technical problems, now has sorted them and back up front.
And these guys at the front are really, really making sure that nobody can pull the same move that they just pulled. They're really running that bottom line tight.
Joshua Daniels is now trying to pull the move. Johnson lets him take it. Now the Adams cars are now moving back up to the middle line. Trouble on the back straightaway in the second pack. Colton Lane, Chad Brown among trouble. Charles Sumner also slowing down, no caution flag. We stay green. Again, that's in the second pack as the lead cars fight with 9 laps to go.
Durbin was forced out right there. Joshua Daniels trying that move he's seen everybody else do, and actually pulled it off successfully.
They're going to reach traffic potentially by the checkered. Robert Corson is up the road a little bit, working with James Duke. Now they're 3 wide as Bisot Jr. now is shuffled about. Williams now works up to the middle. Control of the bottom line. Goes to Keith Haney now with a push from Daniels.
And I think that was too soon by Bisot Jr. right there. He's going to get sent all the way to the back. Nobody's going to be keen to let him back in after the move he pulled on them. So he's going all the way to the tail end here, just able to slot in ahead of Dewar.
There was a mention over the radio last time by from Regan Jr. He needed some air to breathe. Now Lawrence with a little bit of a bobble there. Bisot Jr. now able to breathe again, up the middle again. 8 laps to go.
And then when I said at the beginning that the middle was going to be the powerful line, it is, but not the middle that I was thinking. A lot of these drivers are able to execute this move. There again, we see Bisot Jr. and they weren't quick enough to cover it off.
That time they'll force to check up. That was a little bit too tight for comfort. Williams in the edge of the front though. Will Johnson give him space? No, he's just not giving him quite enough space to try it again, but there is a hole in the bottom.
And see, this is the thing that they're all wise to it now. He's not going to be able to pull the same move again. They saw him go all the way to the front when he did that last time, and now they're very quick to try and cover him off.
Warning given to Durbin for technical issues once again. He's been dropped to the very back of the pack. They'll pass by some of the wrecked cars. That's Chad Brown you see on the apron from that incident we mentioned. 7 laps to go, coming to 6.5 as Regan Jr. now tries to push with Haney up on the top now.
I think that they're going to be able to push Haney out into the lead. Yeah, now Williams is leading that middle line.
And now the top line's forming up. That's a lap car leading the top line. Working with them is Cervantes, Bradley Hawley, who's now joining the fray. 2 of the Adams family racing cars and Durbin, 3 wide, coming to 6 to go.
And Williams is trying to go up to that third lane, but for the moment it's not with him. He's going to fall back until it's there.
Massive shove from Regan Jr. though, back to the bottom side. He goes with Keith Haney. Williams now shuffled about as the top line completely dies out. Bisot Jr. though committed to push Johnson. Regan Jr. slides up for the push in the middle.
He's going to be able to get to the lead here if he gets a good push from Johnson, but Daniels is getting to the back of Haney. Not quite connected as well as those drivers in the middle lane though.
Bisot Jr. tried it again. Again, Paul Johnson is not letting him do it. Really tight squeeze this time to Daniels. Up the track as they both bobble. Regan Jr. loses his pusher. Around to the bottom side goes Scotty Johnson as Williams loses some time on the top still.
Yeah, those drivers all just really being very aggressive with the pushing there right as they got into turn 3, and just kind of got everybody a little bit wrong, and they all had to check up.
5 laps to go from Talladega Super Speedway. Haney, Daniels, Brandon Adams, Regan Jr., Brett Adams, the top 5. Daniels to the top. Keith Haney with the block. Can't block it. Daniels shoved up to the race lead. It's Regan Jr. with a huge shove in the Ford.
And Daniels needs to be careful here. If he doesn't cover the bottom, Regan Jr. is going to get there to him. He's just about able to cover that off.
What a massive block attempt, though, from all these cars. Regan Jr., though, ready to flare up. Paul Johnson now the pusher. Huge shove now from Haney as the bottom line slows down. Among the drivers moving up, Patrick Cowgill, who dropped to the back early on this one, is back up to the front. 4 to go.
Regan Jr. is potentially going to be clear on the exit of turn 2 here. I'm keeping an eye on that driver third in line on the top side. Bissau Jr., he's pushing that 14 really hard right now, but I can't think he's going to go with him. I think he's going to try and leave him out again.
See if they can build up enough momentum. Williams has found some friends at the very back of the line with Dewar and Gilbert. But the top 15 cars separate by 7/10 of a second, coming to 4 to go. Haney taking a peek, doesn't go up. One of the Adams cars trying to wiggle up with Regan Jr. as they try and rebuild.
We got Brandon Adams there, and he's got Brett Adams with him. If Brett Adams can clear Regan Jr., there's a possibility of this pair of cars actually pushing each other to the win here.
And Esau Jr.'s finally shuffled up once again. The number 14 of Paul Johnson. 3 laps to go. Now he's pushing Regan Jr. Up to the middle line goes Brett Adams. Brandon Adams also wiggles up with him.
They're going to get connected here. It's going to take them a little bit to get the momentum build up, though. But the bottom line's going to fall back as we're actually catching a lapped car as well, just to kind of spice this up even more.
A couple of the drivers in the lead pack wanted them to go to the apron. James Dewar has clipped the apron in the 55. Big wig with the back of the field saves it. We stay green as the traffic instead goes to the top. 2 laps to go, this time by. Now Regan Jr. trying to shuffle them out. Contact! They spin towards the line. Caution flag is out. Holly around. Bissau Jr. crashes. Some of the Adams family racing cars involved. And it's green-white checker time with Joshua Daniels in the race lead.
And that looked like that all started where Brad Adams saw Regan Jr. trying to make that move to shuffle him out, and he just wasn't having any of it at that point. And obviously in the tri-oval it's difficult. We talked about it. And I think right there it showed how difficult it is, especially when you've got a 3-wide that you're not expecting.
Take a look at this one as it was a move tried by both Regan Jr. and Bissau Jr. with moderate success all day. That time, too close for Comfort to try and squeeze him out to make a 3 in the tri-oval.
Yeah, and you can see the gap is just about there, but it wasn't expected from Adams. He didn't think that somebody was going to try and do that to him.
Contact in the left rear and they all shuffle about. Cervantes with some damage, Bissau Jr. with a huge shot. Holly also spun, and Durbin also collected the very tail end of the incident. Take a listen on board. This is Bissau Jr.
See, just no way to go for him right there. Obviously packed up behind Regan Jr. right as the wreck unfolded.
Some moderate damage on that car. At the very least, we'll have to lose track position potentially here, and has to let several cars go, in fact, from the spin. Now it gets interesting because, as we expect, none of the lead cars come in, but it just comes down to one green-white checkered attempt. If they get a caution flag before they take the white, race under caution. They take the white flag, next flag ends the race, as simple as that. In other words, a lot can happen here, especially since it's a quick yellow track. Only a couple laps under caution here for a chance to save fuel if you underfueled it.
Yeah, that's definitely something I was thinking of, that drivers might be a little bit tight on fuel depending on whether they elected to short it or not. Obviously, fuel wasn't going to be a concern. It will be a concern if you shorted it and didn't think that there would be a green-white checker with it coming out on 53 like it did. So they might be close. I think everybody will be okay, though.
I think
and especially
so too.
with it only being one green-white checkered, I don't suspect we're going to see anybody run out.
Really, there's only 3 candidates who would have tried to do that in theory, though. Remember, still it's Zemke, Cervantes, Johnson, Wilson out Jr. So 4 who took 2 tires and fuel on the stop instead of taking the 4 tires and 2 cans of fuel in their services. So to reset your top 10, coming to the 1 to go signal this upcoming time by, it's Daniels, Keith Haney, Brandon Adams, Adam Zemke, Scotty Johnson still in 5th despite the incident. Regan Jr. was able to hold on for 6th. Doyle Lawrence, Bisson Jr., Mike Knight, Christopher Williams, your top 10. How do you play this now as a driver to win this type of a race, since there's not a lot of friends around each other now?
It's all going to come down to which lane gets formed up the best and how aggressive. It really comes down to how aggressive the middle lane is and how good a pull they get. Because if they get away and they're formed up, they could conceivably push Keith Haney to the lead by the time they get to the end of the backstretch. And at that point, then it's really all bets are off, because it comes down to who is still formed up and who's going to push with who. That said, I'm curious to see how much damage Richard Regan Jr. has, because obviously being in that wreck, being at Talladega, he was pushing that car along for a significant portion of time. I don't think he's going to be at full speed, and I think that's going to be a disadvantage to that top line if he restarts in 6th.
And if you didn't pit during that first lap, pit roads are closed, and you'll have to serve an end of longest line penalty if you come down this tight. Have seen drivers in some cases have to serve that under green. One driver will duck off the track you see in the backdrop, though. That is Paul Johnson, electing to start at the very end of the field here for the green-white checkered finish. When to go signal this time by.
And keep in mind, he had to come down. I think he must have had to come down, because he was in 14th spot at that time. And there's no way you would give up that track position unless you absolutely had to.
Absolutely. Now keep in mind, majority of your front runners in the point standings entering tonight are still in decent shape in the top 15. But remember, you mentioned you don't want your drop, so to speak, to be Talladega. Well, you don't want to take a drop at all and rely on it. Well, the next race is going to be a tricky one as they go left and right for a road course race.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's even more a reason that you want to come out of here with a good result, because obviously some drivers don't tend to fare so well at the road courses, and obviously they're having a colloquial plate track, as we used to call them, and a road course in the same season. You can't drop both.
Yeah, that's the Charlotte Roval specifically that we're talking about in that regard. And that's going to be a challenging race in and of itself, especially since it's also a week of preparation for you as well for the Coke race, which is the week after.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that's definitely the hardest road course that we go to. Obviously, we ran the Daytona road course, and honestly, that is quite a simple track by comparison to the Charlotte Roval. The Charlotte Roval is much tougher, just in terms of the corner types that you're having to deal with, and the variation of corner types, and the close proximity of the walls and the track edges and everything. It does make it a significantly harder challenge, in my opinion.
It'll be an interesting race. Again, that's next week on the Global SimRacing Channel, 8:50 p.m. Eastern Time. Coverage will begin for that respective round, the 4th one of this season. Pace car coming off for the final restart of round number 3 from Talladega. Daniels and Haney, Brandon Adams and Zemke, Scotty Johnson and Regan Jr., Lawrence and Bisson Jr., Knight and Christopher Williams, your top 10, as we get ready to go racing for one green-white checkered attempt. To the restart zone they roll. Green flag up in hand. We're underway from Talladega for the final restart of the race, and major tire spin in the middle of the pack.
And Zemke didn't get a great start from 4th there.
That was a concern for much of the week on old tires. Drivers have gotten massive tire spin even on 8-lap old tires. That just brought up the whole top line, and Bisson Jr. is dropping like a stone to the 20s.
And see, Williams is being aggressive here. He's electing to go to the top side. Regan Jr. is committed to the bottom. The bottom's currently got 5 cars formed up. The top side's not quite as formed up, but I think they're going to have a run coming down to the last lap here.
Again, white flag, race is official. Anything can happen during those 2.66 miles. Daniels with a big push. Johnson with a bit of a checkup. Top line still trying to form up, but don't have the numbers yet. As they go through the triangle once again, Holly's back up to the middle line after spinning out on the last caution flag.
And the top line's really moving now. Haney's going to have an opportunity.
White flag is out. Race is official. Who will come away with the victory from Talladega? Daniels hugging the bottom. Trying to hold on as the Third Rock Racing Machine gets a huge shove. Zemke working with them. Williams shoves the 57. Move Keith Haney up to the race lead down the backstretch.
And does he stay with that top line, though? I think he probably is going to have to and then cut down when Daniels gets the run. He does. He's just about clear, able to cover it off. Now Zemke's going to have the run.
Now who'll have the run down the front stretch? Haney back up to the top. Zemke tries to shuffle him out. Huge shove for Brandon Adams to the back end of Daniels. Big squeeze. Williams makes contact. They crash to the top. Checker flag as Joshua Daniels wins it at Talladega. Brandon Adams second, Bradley Holly in third as they crash at the stripe and flip behind him.
And a wild finish as we've come to expect from Talladega. And I think right there what really happened is Haney in his move to cover off that middle again left himself completely out on his own.
Yeah, that was a crazy finish there. And Haney played it very well until the final set of corners, it seemed. That front stretch. Everything was all holds barred, so to speak, 4 wide and a huge crash, sending Haney flipping to the stripe.
He did actually cross the stripe at least, though.
Yeah, a huge amount of positions lost, though. 27th is where he finishes. Take a look. This is from the back straightaway.
Yeah, see, he's clear here, and he makes the correct decision to keep with the push up until when Daniels is starting to move forwards, and he covers it off. And this is great at this point, and I think if he commits with Daniels, he has the race run. But he moves back, and it's just too soon. The top line isn't there to push him.
Yeah, and the top line, actually, Williams bobbled around trying to get around him there, ends up hooking him, and in the end, the bottom line ends up pulling the most momentum in. Well, then they celebrate by crashing hard into the wall. Either way, it's Daniels celebrating the race victory, and what an emotional one it has to be for him. Just left AthleteBooker.com's organization. Immediately puts it in victory lane the first race after in the Sim Pit car. With that, take a step aside. Post-race coverage coming up in just a moment. You're watching the Global SimRacing Channel for the virtual Talladega Super Speedway. like exciting finishes? You came to the right place tonight. Welcome back to the virtual Talladega Super Speedway for post-race coverage of the PRL Cup Series. What a thriller. Justin Prince alongside Christian Chowder, Sean Ambrose in the director's seat as you look at your unofficial race results. It came down to the final lap in the final straightaway, but it's Joshua Daniels who comes away with the checker flag by 43/100ths of a second. Bradley Holly comes home in third tonight by a 10th of a second, with Christopher Williams in fourth. Scotty Johnson finished in fifth with Doyle Rentz in sixth. Your pole sitter Richard Regan Jr. played a safe one tonight and still came home in seventh despite being involved in the one caution flag. Patrick Calgill finished in eighth, with Pat Harvey and Mike Knight rounding up your top 10 Christian.
Adam Zemke started fourth on that last restart, but just misses out on top 10 and comes home in 11th. Alongside him, Baron Hilton had a pretty quiet run for the 12th spot, with Greg Curzon in 13th. Brian Abbott all the way from 33rd up into 14th, so a great run by him tonight. And James Haney similar as well, 34th to 15th. Behind them, we had David Wilson Jr. in 16th. Mark Kalin recovered from one lap down to come back in 17th. James Durr, who we saw at the front of the field for the majority of the race, fortunately comes home in 18th, with Robert Curzon in 19th and Colton Lane in 20th.
Bad luck for him. Bad luck for Blaine Adams as well. Was involved in that big incident that brought up the one caution flag. Finishes 21st. Charles Sumner in 22nd was involved in the crash down the back straightaway that didn't trigger a caution flag with 9 laps to go. Among the drivers also in that grouping was Ronald Overbay, with Danny Cervantes collected in that incident that brought out the yellow to finish 24th. Durbin finishing 25th. Nicholas Schwartz, a very quiet race, ran at the back 9 and 26. Keith Haney flipped up into the sky and flew across the stripe, quite literally, to 27th. Brett Adams, Robert Bisson Jr., Paul Johnson round out your top 30. Rest of the drivers finished multiple laps down. Jose Medina, James Duke, Chad Brown. And your one DNF on the evening is Brennan Chatley, 33 laps down is where he falls tonight. Well, that was a thrilling race, so to speak, after what was an exciting one with several different lead changes throughout the evening. But there can only be one winner for this type of event. It's Joshua Daniels. Joshua, you're a winner in the PRL Cup Series this season. How does it feel to win in thrilling fashion tonight?
Oh man, I finally got one. I've come close a lot of times. I had to finish behind Reagan and them guys, but it feels good to be back in red, and it feels good to be back out front, man.
First, let's talk about the finish, because you led 15 laps tonight. It was a back and forth affair in the closing stages. You had drivers squeezing one another out at some points, even in the middle of the pack. Your thoughts on those final 10 laps or so, including the green-white checker to determine this race?
When you get into a situation like that, it just takes a lot of practice and a lot of being in situations like that. And I put in a lot of time and did a lot of open races and raced with a lot of good, guys throughout the week. Just guys I didn't even know. And this is actually, the same way it turned out here tonight. And I knew exactly what I needed to do.
You mentioned you're glad to be back in red. How does it feel to win this race after, of course, the news that just happened? Yes, but finally breaking through victory lane in this car, in the very end, in the Sim Pit car specifically.
I can't say nothing but good things about TY and those guys. I just, I like my color red, and I just feel really good to be back in it, and it's just a good sign to be out front, back in red, and hopefully I can repeat this next week.
Of course, this moves you on into the next round technically as well, into the full season playoffs, but as well, it's a difficult race for the next round. Your thoughts on going to the Charlotte Roval for the next round of the season?
That place is pretty scary, so I'm hoping that I can get fast enough to qualify out front and just run off and leave everybody and won't have to worry about nothing else but just, staying on the track and keeping my pace. That's what I'm hoping for, I'm going to push for that.
Mm-hmm. Anyone you want to thank for your run tonight?
I'd like to thank my wife, she puts up with a lot of hours of me practicing and running races, and she's very supportive. She's got, the t-shirt from you guys, and she's got PRL t-shirts, GSRC t-shirts, and she wears that stuff on my night, on my race nights, and I think it gives me some good luck, man. I'd like to thank her, and I'd like to thank the GSRCs for putting on a good show, and the PRL for putting on a good league.
Glad to hear you have that shirt, and glad to hear that worked out. Congratulations for what was a well worked out finish for you this evening.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Joshua Daniels, your race winner tonight. Your third different winner in 3 races in the PRL Cup Series so far this season. Coming up just short. The Adams family racing cars were up at the front much of the night. It's Brandon Adams, though, is the only one who finishes inside the top 10. He's with Christian.
Brandon, that looked like you had a pretty good night there, especially as a family. You guys were all really pushing each other, and at the beginning of the race, you kind of had a little bit of lock on kind of who was leading the race, and you kind of got a little bit disconnected after that pit stop, but you were able to hold on, and obviously came home with the second position, which is it's an amazing result. But talk us through how the race kind of ran from your perspective, trying to work as a team, and how that kind of influenced when you guys made that decision to make that pit stop.
Yeah, so throughout the first half of the race, we kind of, for a little bit, took up the inside and outside line. We kind of wanted to control the pace just a tad and kind of settle in, kind of see how it go. And then, we wound up all getting inside and just kind of pushing each other. And then on pits, we kind of had a predetermined time, just a little bit past halfway when we wanted to jump in. And I guess I got a little bit better entry and exit than my brothers there, but it all worked out in the end. And they tried to make a push. They just started to lose it towards the end, but worked out well for me.
Now, talk us through a little bit, kind of coming down to the end, where obviously you were in that big battle and kind of lane choice is everything, and picking as and when you go, and not obviously getting shuffled back. And we saw it with obviously we had that wreck coming down to the very end of the race there, which was an instance of a driver being shuffled back. How did you kind of prevent that from happening? We saw you running in the bottom lane for a vast majority of the race, and was that kind of your decision that you were going to kind of commit to that lane, and however it played out was however it played out?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I mean, call it timidness or call it inexperience. I mean, I've only been on the service for a couple months now. It's just something that I felt comfortable on the bottom, and even going into the white flag, I didn't really know how to time that pass, and I didn't want to get shuffled. So I figured if I stay on the inside and I just push as best I can, I figured I could at least get into top 3 and get some new blood into the interview booth.
Well, we're definitely glad to have you come and chat with us. And when it comes to that strategy of running that bottom line, I'm a fan of it. I have to say it's a strategy I've used myself very well at Daytona. So it's definitely a decision that works. And obviously you proved that by coming home with the second spot. Before we let you go, is there anybody that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, it's thanks my wife Kelsey, my brothers Brent and Blaine make up the other 2/3 of Adams Family Racing, our sponsor Spirit Ride, and then obviously GSRC and PRL for putting on a good show.
All right. Well, thank you for coming and chatting with us, and good luck for next week at the Roval.
Thanks, boys.
Once again, that is Brandon Adams coming home in second tonight. Very quiet race for Bradley Hawley. Stayed at the very back just about the entire night, then quietly came home with the top 3. Bradley, how would you describe your race?
That was eventful. During that big one, I got hit from the back and kind of got spun going across the start finish line. Was able to gather it back up and I think restarting 12th.
Give or take, yes, indeed. And we see some of that back end damage, in fact, on our screens right now. What was it like trying to plot out this race this evening? Because some of your fellow drivers like to be up the front and lead laps, while we didn't see you up in the top 20, I don't think, until those final 15, 20 laps.
Yeah, I was pretty concerned about how these cars were drafting and the closing rate. So I honestly thought we were going to have a wreck much earlier than we did. And then when we did have the wreck when I was up front, I was thinking, go figure. I get up here and that's when mayhem starts to break. But ended up somehow avoiding it and getting this top 3.
Next race, Charlotte Roval. Your thoughts going there, as your race winner tonight described it as him expecting a very interesting race, and Christian Chowder saying it's one of the more difficult road courses on the service.
Oh, by far, it's definitely probably the hardest that we will run in the PRL. But I enjoy my road course racing, and I'll get some practice in, and it should be a good race.
Anyone you want to thank for that run tonight in that 184 machine?
I'd like to thank the WEBB guys, the rescue racing guys also, because we all work together. you guys for broadcasting us week in, week out, and all our sponsors.
Congratulations on the top 3 run tonight.
Thank you.
That's Bradley Hawley, by the way, also tentatively your unofficial points leader, without drops factored in after tonight, as remember, he was only a few points back of the points lead, with James O'Brien taking the drop this evening. Now, Christian, overall, what are your thoughts on this race this evening, and what was a crucial round for this campaign with how crazy the next few races can be?
Well, I was really impressed that we had such a long green flag run that we did. I think it was pretty much inevitable that we were going to have at least one caution towards the end of the race, and we saw those. I kind of want to call them crazy, but they were really impressive moves at the same time that we saw from Richie Regan Jr. and obviously from the 3 car, Robert Visor Jr. kind of channeling that 3 energy right there. And we saw it from him, and it was a really good move. How they were working their way forwards without having to go all the way to the outside lane. It kind of, it got to the end of the race, and you knew that drivers were going to be less accepting of it. And I don't think it's really on anybody that a caution came out. It's just kind of a meeting that we had in the middle of the tri-oval there. So it was a really impressive race overall. We obviously saw those moves that were really cool to see. It was cool to see drivers kind of making their way to the front by being pretty aggressive, but without resulting in contact that was taking people out of the race and so on. And I know I said at the beginning of the night it'd be nice to see some guys who we don't normally see at the front kind of having a shot at this, and I felt for the most part that we did have that. Obviously, we had Brandon Adams come home in second, which was really cool to see, and obviously he was pretty stoked to come and chat with us, so that was nice. But at the end, it was kind of one of our regular contenders, Joshua Daniels, coming away with the win. So I guess some things don't really change that much, even on plate tracks.
An interesting race indeed so far, or tonight rather. What's been a very interesting season. It has just seems a different tone compared to the other 3 seasons in 2020. But we'd like to thank you for tuning in for tonight's exciting action once again for the virtual Talladega Super Speedway. We'd also like to thank Charles Sumner and the rest of the Precision Racing League for organizing this strong series. We'd also like to thank the title sponsors for the PRL Cup Series, WEBB Hearing Centers, and ButtKicker. Take the time as well to thank the companies who provide the software and hardware for our broadcast listed up on screen, with additional thanks going to Jude Law who provides your wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of our great work. Thanks to the team once again today, and Christian and Sean. If you'd like to find out more about the Global SimRacing Channel, including upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. To help support the channel, check out our merchandise for sale at gsrc.stormvy.com, or you can check out our social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global SimRacing Channel, one word, and Instagram at GSRC_Graham. Don't forget to head over to your YouTube page and hit that big red subscribe button so you don't miss a moment on the Global SimRacing Channel. As mentioned, the next race on the campaign is going to be an interesting one as well, because it's road course racing, but not just any road course. It's the Charlotte Roval. Once again, that'll take place next Sunday. See that live on the Global SimRacing Channel. That is on October the 11th. Starts at 8:50 p.m. Eastern Time. Green flag by 9:05 p.m. We also have upcoming races for other series listed up on screen. So be sure to check those out as well and mark them down on your calendar. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.